Ladies and gentlemen, before I say a single word tonight, I want you to do something for me. I want you to close your eyes for just a moment. Go ahead, close them. And I want you to think about the last time you lost control. Maybe it was your mouth. You said something you can never take back. Maybe it was your mind. You spiraled so deep into fear and doubt that you couldn't get out of bed for days. Maybe it was your mood. You snapped at someone you loved, someone who deserved your best, but got your worst. Or maybe it was your money. You watched it disappear not because life was cruel, but because you never learned to hold it, guide it, respect it. Close your eyes and feel that moment. Feel the weight of it. The regret, the shame, the quiet voice inside you that said, "How did I let that happen again?" Now open your eyes, because tonight that ends. Tonight is not a seminar. Tonight is not a lecture. Tonight is not somebody up here on a stage telling you what to do with your life. Tonight is a conversation between two human beings who have both been broken, both been lost, and both had to find their way back. And if you came here looking for a quick fix, a three-step formula, a magic sentence that will solve everything by morning, I have to be honest with you. That's not what tonight is. But if you came here ready to go deep, ready to be honest with yourself, ready to look in the mirror and see not just who you are, but who you've been choosing to be, then I promise you, something will shift inside you tonight. Something real, something lasting. Because the four things that will determine the quality of your entire life are not your education, not your connections, not your talent, not even your circumstance. The four things that will determine everything are how you control your mouth, how you control your mind, how you control your mood, and how you control your money. Master those four things, you can build a life that makes you proud. Lose control of even one of them, and I don't care how gifted you are. I don't care how hard you work. I don't care how good your intentions are. You will keep suffering the same cycles, the same pain, the same limitations over and over and over again. So let's talk about it, all of it, for real this time. I grew up watching my father work himself into the ground, and I mean that almost literally. He was a laborer, hands cracked, back bent, up before the sun, every single morning of his life. And I remember as a child watching him come home and sitting across the table from him at dinner. And his eyes told a story that his mouth never would. Because my father was proud. Too proud to admit he was exhausted. Too proud to admit he was afraid. Too proud to ask for help. And I used to think when I was young that pride was the same thing as strength. I used to think a man who never cried, a man who never complained, a man who swallowed every hard feeling and just kept pushing. I thought that was strength. It took me decades to understand that what I was watching was not strength. What I was watching was a man at war with himself. A man who had never learned to control his inner world, so he controlled nothing at all. Not really. He controlled his expression, yes. He controlled his tears, yes, but his mind was a storm. His mood would shift and the whole house would feel it. His words, on the rare occasions he let them out, could cut like glass. And his money, despite all that work, despite all those early mornings and broken backs, his money was always gone. Always. Because nobody ever taught him. Nobody ever sat down with him and said, "These four things, your mouth, your mind, your mood, your money, these are the things you must master." Nobody told him. So nobody told me, and I had to learn the hard way. And maybe you did too. Let me talk to you about the mouth first. Because I think the mouth is where most of us do the most damage, to ourselves and to others, without even realizing it. The mouth is extraordinary. Think about it. In the span of a single sentence, your mouth can destroy a 30-year friendship. In the span of a single sentence, your mouth can bring someone who is drowning completely back to life. The mouth is the most powerful instrument you will ever own. And most of us walk around using it carelessly, recklessly, like a child with a loaded weapon who doesn't understand what it does. I remember the year I almost lost my marriage, and I don't say that lightly. I'm talking about the woman I chose, the woman I promised, the woman who had stood beside me through failures I'm still embarrassed to name. And one night, after a terrible day, after a week of stress and pressure and feeling like I was failing at everything, we had an argument. I don't even remember what it started over. I think it was something small, something stupid. But the pressure inside me had been building for so long, and the words just came out. Not one sentence, not two, a flood. Everything I'd been holding in, everything I'd been too proud to say with vulnerability, came out instead as an attack. Words I cannot repeat here. Words that I watched land like punches. And I remember the moment I saw her face change. Not from anger, not from hurt, but from something worse than both of those things combined: disappointment. The deep, quiet, devastating disappointment of someone who is looking at you and realizing that maybe they don't know you as well as they thought they did. She left the room, and I sat there, and the silence was so loud. Here's what I learned from that night: words do not disappear when they leave your mouth. People like to say, I was just venting, or I didn't really mean it, or they know I was upset. No, words land, words embed. Words become part of the story that person tells themselves about who they are and who you are. Scientists who study language and the brain tell us that the human brain responds to harsh words, especially from someone we love, someone we trust, in almost the same way it responds to physical pain. The body actually registers it as a threat. The cortisol spikes, the nervous system activates, And for some people, particularly people who grew up in homes where words were used as weapons, a single sentence from the wrong person at the wrong moment can undo years of healing. That is the power you are carrying in your mouth every single day. So what does it mean to control your mouth? It does not mean silence. It does not mean stuffing your feelings down and pretending everything is fine. It means developing the pause. The pause is everything. Between the thing that triggers you and the words that come out of your mouth, there is a gap. And in that gap lives either your wisdom or your destruction. Every single time. Most people have never been taught to live in that gap. Most people have been taught by their families, by their cultures, by their experiences to react, to fire back, to match energy, to show strength by showing teeth. But the most powerful thing a human being can do in a moment of provocation is pause, breathe, and ask 3 questions before they open their mouth. Number 1, is what I'm about to say true? Number 2, is it necessary? Number 3, is it kind? 3, is it kind? And if the answer to all 3 of those is yes, speak. Speak clearly, speak honestly, speak with love. But if the answer to any one of those is no, and you choose to speak anyway, you need to own what comes next. Because words are not neutral. Words are not just air vibrating. Words are architecture. The words we speak to others build or destroy structures they live inside emotionally. And the words we speak to ourselves, the words we say quietly in our own heads when no one else is listening, those words are building or destroying us right now, every day. Which brings me to the mind. Oh, the mind. Ladies and gentlemen, the human mind is the most astonishing and the most terrifying thing in all of creation. Because it is the only instrument in the universe that can either be your greatest ally or your most relentless enemy. And the choice of which one it becomes is entirely, completely, and sometimes devastatingly up to you. Let me tell you about a period in my life when my mind became a prison. I was in my early 30s. I had tried to build something, a business, a dream I'd been carrying since I was 22 years old. I had sacrificed for it. I'd worked nights, I'd borrowed money. From people I loved, I'd turned down safer paths, steadier jobs, because I genuinely believed. And then it failed. Not slowly, not gradually. It collapsed in about 6 weeks. And the failure itself, as painful as it was almost manageable. What was not manageable was what happened inside my mind afterward. Because the mind, when it is traumatized and untrained, does something particularly cruel. It doesn't just process the failure and move on. It replays it over and over and over again, like a film reel stuck on the worst scene. I would wake up at 3 in the morning, with my heart pounding, replaying conversations, replaying decisions, asking myself why didn't I see it coming? Why did I trust that person? Why did I make that choice? And the replay would always end in the same place, with a verdict. And the verdict was always guilty. You failed. You were naive. You were not smart enough. You were not strong enough. You will never be enough. And I would lie there in the dark and I would believe it, every word of it. Because when you're exhausted and your confidence is shattered and it's 3 in the morning and the only voice in the room is your own mind, that voice sounds like truth. But it was not truth. It was not truth. It was fear wearing the costume of logic. Here is what nobody tells you about the mind. The mind is not a neutral record of reality. The mind is the storyteller. And like all storytellers, it has biases, it has agendas, It has patterns it returns to again and again because those patterns are familiar, because familiar feels safe even when familiar is destroying you. Psychologists call this cognitive distortion, the tendency of the mind to interpret experience through filters of fear, shame, and past pain rather than through the clarity of present reality. And here's the terrifying part. You can be incredibly intelligent, incredibly educated, incredibly self aware, and still be completely at the mercy of your cognitive distortions because intelligence does not automatically equal mental mastery. Knowing about your biases and actively working to override them are two entirely different things. So, how do you begin to take control of your mind? The first step, and I know this sounds almost too simple, but stay with me. The first step is stop believing everything you think. That sentence right there changed my life. Stop believing everything you think. Because your thoughts are not facts, your thoughts are suggestions. Your thoughts are the mind's attempt to process experience through the filters it has developed over a lifetime. And some of those filters are accurate, helpful, and wise. And some of those filters are broken, outdated, and catastrophically wrong. Your job, your daily, relentless, non negotiable job, is to examine your thoughts rather than simply obey them. Viktor Frankl, a man who survived the Holocaust, who lost everything and everyone, who stood in the ruins of his entire world and still found his way back to meaning, wrote something that I have carried with me every day since I first read it. He said that between stimulus and response there is a space, and in that space is our power to choose our response, and in our response lies our growth and our freedom. Read that again. Between what happens to you and what you do about it, there is a space. That space is where your humanity lives. That space is where your power lives. Most people never find that space because they have spent their whole lives reacting, never responding, never responding. And I want to be honest with you about how hard it is to find that space. It is not a weekend retreat kind of hard. It is not read a book and feel inspired kind of hard. It is get up every morning and choose deliberately when every instinct in your body is screaming at you to react, to defend, to collapse, to run, and choose consciously instead. It is the hardest work a human being can do, but it is also the most important work a human being can do. Because the person who masters their own mind does not just change their own life, they change every life they touch. I want to tell you about a woman named Maria. I won't use her last name. Maria grew up in a home that was, by every clinical definition, traumatic. Father with a drinking problem. Mother who worked 3 jobs and was too exhausted to provide the emotional presence children need. Maria learned early that she could not depend on the adults around her for stability, for safety, for love. So she built walls. Brilliant, necessary, survival level walls. And those walls kept her safe as a child. But by the time Maria was in her 40s, those same walls were keeping out everything good, every opportunity for intimacy, every chance at real partnership, every moment when someone genuinely tried to reach her, to reach her. And if you tell yourself a morning, consciously or unconsciously, that you are not enough, that the world is against you, that success is for other people, that you don't deserve love or abundance or peace, your mind will confirm that story with the same relentless efficiency. I'm going to look for what we both need, not just what I need. I'm capable of handling whatever comes up here. Those two internal narratives before the same conversation will produce two completely different people walking through that door. Same person, same situation. Not a parent who was falsely cheerful, not a parent who never felt pain, but a parent who modeled in real time what it looks like to feel hard things and still choose stability. What would it mean for your team if their leader could stay grounded in the middle of crisis? The truth of your financial situation is happening to you whether you're willing to face it. The question is only whether you will be an active participant in what happens next. So let's start here. Because at some deep level, you believe that getting ahead financially means becoming someone you don't want to be. And your integrity, your actual genuine desire to be a good person, will keep stopping you just before you break through. Because breaking through feels like breaking character. Or at least that you're willing to try to be Ray. And that willingness, that small, trembling, sometimes terrified willingness, is where everything begins. There is a concept that Jim Rohn, the great business philosopher, articulated in a way that has never been improved upon. You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Your child watching you pause before you speak instead of reacting is learning that they have the power to pause. And I loved him. I loved him completely. I understood why he was the way he was. He had not been taught. He had not been given the language or the models or the permission to do the inner work. And he did the best he could with what he had. What relationships might be transformed, what communities might be lifted, what organizations might become possible if you became someone who could be counted on to show up emotionally rated and fully present regardless of the weather in your inner world. Be patient with yourself on the hard days when you slide back, and you will slide back, and that is part of the process, and it does not mean you have failed. Be willing to begin again as many times as it takes, because the only version of this work that fails is the version you abandon.